y'all, I'm Elisa, the Scrappy Wife behind ScrappyWife.com, and today we are going to talk about embossing powders. We're going to talk about the comparison between two different price points on embossing powders and kind of what to look for as you are working with embossing powders. So I will make sure to list everything that I end up using down below. Otherwise, let's go. Okay, so this video came about after kind of discussing with a couple of my friends the different price points on embossing powders and why did they cost different amounts and why should we pay more for certain brands over others? Is that like a generic thing and they're actually all the same, or are they different? And so that is kind of what we're going to experiment with today. I'm going to compare a couple different embossing powders, the Recollections brand and the Wow brand, which is pretty well known, pretty good. And we're going to see how they look different, how they compare, and then kind of see where we go from there. All right, so first things first, when you are embossing, I highly recommend prepping your surface. I like to use the EK Powder Success tool. And what this does, I'm actually just going to kind of prep this whole page. What this does is kind of removes or helps to remove any stickiness that is on your page that might have come from oil on your hands, might have come from something on the table, anything like that. So this is going to make sure that the powder does not stick where you don't want it to stick. For the ink, we're going to use Versamark sticky ink, which is kind of, I feel like, the gold star ink for embossing. I love it. I've used it forever and it works really nicely. And we're going to use this stamp set from By the Well for God. This one is called Lights of Hope, and I happen to really like this particular stamp because it has some thin lines, so you'll get to see some detail. It even has a little broken line right there that will be good to see how it picks up. So I thought, and it has a lot of open space, so I thought all of that would be good to kind of test out. So let's start. Let me go ahead and label. We're going to put Recollections over on this side, and then we're going to put Wow over on this side. So I'm going to start out with the Recollections. I will stamp, get my stamp nice and sticky from the ink pad, and then you just simply stamp down. Now, you can kind of see it right there. It's clear ink, but when it's wet, you can certainly see it. And then I just take it directly from the container and pour it over. Generally at this point, I'll kind of shift it around to make sure it's the full coverage. And then you can always just tap off your excess onto an extra sheet of paper like that. So that is how it looks after the Recollections brand. Once you've done it on your extra sheet of paper, you just take that and kind of funnel it back in so that you're not wasting any embossing powder. So that is the Recollections one. Now let's stamp with the Wow powder. Powder, hard for me to say. Okay, so I'm getting the stamp nice and sticky. I will stamp it over on this side so that there is plenty of space. Good stamped impression. And now this is the Wow. We're going to do Metallic Platinum Super Fine. So this is also a different coarseness of powder. So I'm just going to shift it around, make sure it's covering all of the parts, kind of tap off the excess, and there. So far, not a lot of difference. It seems to have caught on all of the appropriate parts, and I don't see a lot of excess powder hanging out. So let me just put this away, and then we will use our heat tool. So in order to activate embossing powder, you have to heat it up. This is the Ranger heat tool. You can hear it kind of sounds like a hair dryer as it's going on. I'm going to turn it on for just a minute, kind of let it heat up a little bit. I've had people ask, can you use a hair dryer? A hair dryer is not actually going to get as hot. This gets really hot And a hairdryer is going to blow more forceful air, so it might actually blow your embossing powder everywhere. So you're going to want an actual heat tool. They also have embossing guns that you can pick up usually at a craft store or of course scrapbook.com. And then once your tool has heated up, you just simply take it and start heating up that embossing powder so that it dries. I'm going to kind of lift it up here so you can see it activated right away. As soon as it heats up, it's one of the most satisfying parts of crafting, I feel like, is watching embossing powder melt. All of those little particles are melting and smoothing out. So that is the recollection side. Let's take a look at the wow side. I'm recording. Thank you, Beck. Let's take a look at the wow side as it heats up. There you go. You see it activated. And all done. Okay, so as we compare side by side, same color on both of them, now it looks to me like the Recollections is a little bit more raised in how it looks. It didn't quite spread out as much. The Wow brand seems to be smoother in spreading out, but some of the edges, if you can tell, might be a little bit rougher. So as far as I can tell, I mean, this, like right here, it feels like not everything melted all the way, not as smooth. I really like the consistency of color in the Wow. So my preference, at first I was thinking they look the same, but the more and more I look at it, I really like the consistency of the color in the Wow. I feel like this one is raised so much that it's a little bit different. So in that case, the more expensive one, the Wow, seems to have done pretty well. Now you can rub it. It stays on. It does have a texture to it. If you have not tried embossing powder, it does have a texture. And that is the comparison between those two brands. All right, let's talk for a second about the different coarseness options for most embossing powders. This is a white detail embossing powder, which means it's going to be extra fine. The idea being this will be an option if you have a really detailed image that you're wanting to emboss. So I'm actually going to take this stamp that has a light bulb with a line drawing of a rose inside. So lots of details in here. I will ink up the stamp, and this time I'm actually going to come this way just to make sure I don't press too hard. So inking up the stamp right there. There we go. And I'm actually going to do a second one just so we can see. Very, very light. All right. So we'll take the white detailed embossing powder. This is another brand, Sparkle and Sprinkle. So new to me. We'll spread that on. And then same idea of just then knocking it out. Now what I forgot, and you can see, I forgot to use my powder tool. So now you can see all of that extra embossing right there. Let me show you the difference really fast because I do think it's really interesting and something that I didn't know when I started learning about embossing. So if I take the powder tool and I just put it right here. Now, right now, of course, it looks like there's a bunch of extra powder. That can be wiped off later, but if I do that and then I stamp my image down, once I do the embossing powder, it'll only stick to where that image is, which is really important so that your stamping, your embossing, your cards, end up being nice and neat. So you can see totally clear around it. I can wipe off that powder after I melt it, but here it is stuck to different parts of the paper. So really prepping your page has a lot to do with the success of your embossing. All right, same plan with the heat. We are going to add that on and we'll wait and see as it starts to melt. Again, you'll see it start to activate and melt. It kind of spreads out ever so slightly, becomes a more solid line, and then you just keep moving your heat tool around until it is all done. All right, so after you have embossed it, you can see you can just come back and kind of wipe off, but this stuff up here is not going to come off because it is now embossed. So all of those extra little marks are going to be an issue. So let's take a look at the fine. So look at all of those little itty bitty lines that it caught up, and you can still see all of the details. So it really does make a difference if you're wanting to do some finer stamping, some fine details. Get embossing powder that is meant for that particular kind of stamping. There are also a couple of other different types of embossing powder that I wanted to share with you. The first would be this embossing glaze. So this is not technically a powder, it's a glaze. You can see one of these isn't even open. So this is from Tim Holtz and Ranger. So it is in some of the colors that are in that distress line. So this is Distress Embossing Glaze. And what the embossing glaze is it's meant to be translucent. So let's try an example. Let's take that same stamped image and we're going to just stamp right here with the embossing glaze. Again, I did not prep. I always forget to prep. All right, and then same thing as the embossing powder. Sprinkling it on, shifting it around, getting off as much as I can, considering I didn't prep. Something else you can do is kind of knock some of it off if you were like me and forgot to prep. And then when you melt it, it kind of has this translucent feel. It won't be as easy to see on white, so I'll show you on a different color as well. All right, so there you go. Beautiful yellow that matches with the distress line, which is cool. But if we put it on to this paper, you're not going to get the same vibrancy as you would with the white on the black, because this one is meant to be translucent. And actually, this will be kind of interesting. Let's overlap these. Let's see what happens. We will overlap, put that down. And we'll go with the yellow again, since that's the one we used before. Sprinkle some of that on, and then knock it off onto our extra sheet over here. You can see there was some overlap. Some of the powder didn't stick though, so let's hit it again. There you go. Okay, now let's heat this up and see what happens. All right, so you can see it very nearly disappears. There's a slight yellow tint, and then you can see as it's going over the white parts, those yellow marks coming through. So that's just showing you the translucence. Something else that is cool about the embossing glaze, which is also works for embossing powder, but something that Tim Holtz emphasized is that it sticks to water droplets. So let me grab my water tool. Okay, so this is the Distress Spray Tool, and I'm going to use it to just kind of add some water droplets on my page. First, let me clean this up. And let's try the blue. So we will open and we'll just kind of sprinkle some blue across the page, see what it sticks to. There you go. So it caught to those splatters, which is extra fun. And then we just heat it up and they will be translucent. And look at how it even caught the littlest little bits of the mist, which I think is super fun. All right, so there is the final look with the embossing glaze attached to the water. That is a very cool effect. I really, really like how that looks. So that is the Distress Embossing Glaze. I just have a couple of those in some different colors. I don't use it a lot, but it can create some neat effects on your projects for sure, especially the overlapping of embossed images. I think that would be super cool. So something else I wanted to show you was that there is actually glitter. So embossing glitter is a little bit different from embossing powder because it is going to stay pretty chunky. So I have two different ones here. This, and actually I'm going to switch and use a blue paper so we'll be able to see them just a little bit. So this is the Ranger brand. This one is called Bridal Tinsel. It says embossing powder, but you can see that it's definitely glitter. And then this is Wow Embossing Glitter Black Glint. So let me pick a different one of these. I think I'm going to go back to my original stamp with the light bulb that says Hope, one of my favorites. And we'll test these two different embossing glitters and see what kind of impression they give. All right, first I'm going to prep. Look at me, I remembered to prep. So prepping the top of my page right here. And then I will stamp. So bringing this down, inking up my image right here. Pressing firmly, and then we will add the glitter. Very sparkly, very pretty. You definitely want to prep before using glitter because it is going to go everywhere. All right, so that is the glitter, and let's try the black. Inking up the stamp and then putting it down. And then let's try the black Wow glitter. Super pretty. Super pretty. Tapping that off onto my page. Oh, that one is one of my favorites for sure. Oops, mixed up a little bit there. All right, now sometimes the glitter embossing powders can be a little bit trickier to make sure that you have melted the product all of the way. It takes a little bit longer in general with the glitter embossing powders. All right, so you can see this one's slightly translucent. Once it's on there, it definitely feels like glitter. It has that rough texture, but it is melted and stuck on the page just like embossing powder. And the same thing over here. So it definitely feels like glitter, has the rough texture, but it's not going to rub off like regular glitter might with just glue on top. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider hitting that subscribe button as well as the bell notification button. I have listed all of these supplies down below with links if you are interested in checking those out. Heads up, some of those are affiliate links. They do not cost you anymore, but they do go a long way to supporting this channel. Speaking of supporting this channel, thank you so much to all of my YouTube members. You are awesome. I appreciate all of your support. If you are interested in finding out more about YouTube membership and the extra perks that my YouTube members receive, make sure to click the join button down below as well. I hope that you have a fabulous day. And as always, keep it creative.